The cold stone floor of my room penetrated the nerve endings in my knees. I knelt in front of the laptop that had been given to me to create the content my viewers craved. I shivered into the camera and watched in anticipation as the chat box swelled with interaction. I had always wanted to be a successful streamer, but I never had luck with marketing myself. So when I received the invitation to move into a streaming house, my heart was overwhelmed with euphoric joy. My body sank to the ground and my mind soared into the clouds. I was finally going to do it. I would finally make it. That was 3 months ago, and this experience is not at all what I had expected it to be. I didn't recognize the streaming platform the owner made us use, and I hadn't made any friends with other content creators. Of course, it was hard to make friends when the only time you could leave your room was when you were collaborating with another streamer. I refocused on the laptop in front of me. I had 352 viewers, and my chat was moving so fast I could barely read it. I could see the typical comments passing by in a blur asking to see my scars or if I had infected wounds from the last stream. I lifted my shirt and showed the viewers the ghost of lacerations on my stomach that rippled through the valleys of my protruding ribs, or the scabs that cracked and bled on the back of my hands. The donations always poured in. It was my night to be the main event. I was on the schedule for a collaboration with the owners themselves, and the anticipation was killing me. This is what it took to be huge in this industry, and I was going to make it. I heard the locks on the steel door to my bedroom pop with a loud clunk, and the rusty metal began to scrape across the floor. The owners walked with a slow, drifting pace. The white robes they wore masked their feet in a way that made them appear to float in their strides. I looked at their covered faces and briefly recalled the pain from the last event. An immediate dreadful panic set in. I tried to crawl away across the filthy rock floor, but I felt a devilish hand grip my ankle. Due to my malnourishment, I was too tired and weak to fight back. Dragging me back to my spot by the laptop, they drew the long knives they favored so heavily. The blades shimmered in the dimly lit room. My sight fell to the live stream. As I watched, I could see one of them placing a knife to my neck. The cold steel shook my very core. I watched as the viewer count dashed its way to 700. I was finally going to make it. I've been a veteran of the police dispatch team now for 15 years. I've heard calls about everything from domestic violence to robberies in progress, to a neighbor calling to complain about the family next door playing their music too loud. You name it, I've more than likely dealt with it. It was finally my Friday. After a long week and hours of overtime, I would finally be off and enjoy 2 days off in a row for once. It was a quiet night. I had only answered about 8 calls in the last hour, and usually I'll answer about 20 plus calls per hour. I was only 30 minutes away from having my 2 days off when I received a call. 911, what is your emergency? I'd like to order a large pizza, please. I immediately took it as someone trying to play a prank. We get many prank calls during our shift. Miss, you really shouldn't be calling if you don't have an emergency. You could be holding up someone who actually need... She interrupts me. No, ma'am. I really need a pizza. I ask her if she's in any danger. Yes, with pepperoni and olives, she says. I ask her, do you know the address of where you're at? No, I think our apartment is by the quarter coin laundromat, but I don't know exactly the address, she says. Are you ordering a pizza? Says a man in the background. No, you're calling the cops, you lying bit. I could only assume that he snatched the phone away from her. She began to scream and I could hear the impact of fists and slaps hitting her body and could hear her begging for help. Ma'am, where are you? We're sending help your way, I said. You could hear the anxiety in my voice. I did what I could, but she wasn't calling from a landline, and her phone wasn't pinging to any local towers. I tried to get her attention again, but she didn't reply. I could hear her begging for him to stop hitting her, and he would continue to hit her and yell at her, calling her all sorts of expletives. "Today I'm going to make an example out of you, and I'll let the operator listen," the man said. I continued to track the call, but our system wasn't equipped to track the call. I was starting to lose hope. I've never felt so panicked in my life. Next thing I hear is a chainsaw going off in the background, and her blood-curdling scream. This man was hacking her to death. I was finally able to find her location, and at the same time pleading with the man to let her live and to save her life. He laughed and said, "Well, I hope she learned. Bad girls get punished." The call ended. I tried to call back and the phone was off. I ran over to my supervisor and gave her the location of the closest ping. I told her that someone had just been killed while on a call with me. My supervisor looked at me and said, "Carrie, are you feeling okay?" I said yes through tears in my eyes and pleaded for her to send the lady help. My supervisor asked me to take a seat and she would bring me water. I told her that I didn't want any water and I needed her to send as many units as possible to help this poor girl. "Carrie, your station hasn't had a call in close to 30 minutes. Maybe you're having an episode." I kept getting more and more frustrated. I couldn't understand why she wasn't willing to help. I saw a couple of my friends who are cops walk by. They're in charge of patrolling the area the call was taking place in. I asked them to help. I explained everything that happened to them, but they looked at me with confusion. "Carrie, you good?" "Yes, I'm fine. Why is no one taking my plead seriously?" Chris, one of the officers, said, "Carrie, you took a similar call 10 years ago today. A young lady was murdered by her stalker. You did everything you could. You need to forgive yourself." My supervisor walked over to me. "Maybe you should take the rest of the week off. You need it." My name is Jason, and I'm an avid photographer. I'm obsessed with anything to do with photography. I also collect cameras and all sorts of memorabilia. I enjoy traveling around taking pictures of sceneries and visiting different thrift shops while on my outings. On one particular trip to Oregon, my life changed forever. After spending the day in the mountains enjoying the fresh air and snapping as many shots as possible, I decided to stop by a local thrift shop. I found a Canon camera that was in fairly good shape. Besides a slightly cracked screen, it worked and was selling at a fair price. I purchased the camera, thanked the clerk, and walked over to my car. When I got home, I decided to check out my new camera. I noticed the camera was almost out of battery, so I decided to plug it into my laptop, and as the camera charged, I would check to see if the previous owner left any pictures behind. There were at least 50 pictures stored on the camera's memory. The first 20 were of different sceneries and random shots of campsites, but the last 30 were far more sinister. The 30 pictures were of people getting tortured to death. The picture started as the families, yes, families, men, women, and children, bound and gagged onto a bed, everyone's eyes focused to whoever had the camera. You could see the worry in their eyes filled with tears and fear. My curiosity got the better of me, and I continued to look. The following pictures were of people screaming. I couldn't tell if they were in pain or watching something horrific happen to their family members. Some of you may be thinking, did you continue to watch? Unfortunately and regrettably, I did. It only got worse and I haven't been the same since. Without getting into too much detail, the last pictures were the worst of them all. The dismembered and mutilated bodies of the family members covered the last pictures of the camera roll. When I got to a certain picture of the youngest member of the family, I literally stood up and ran to the toilet to barf. I felt sick to my stomach. I remember thinking, why didn't I stop looking at these pictures? I couldn't control myself, and I kept looking at the pictures as they progressively got more sinister and twisted. Whoever did this to these families also played with their bodies and limbs as if they were toys. I turned off my computer. I had no choice but to call my parents and ask them to come over. I showed my parents some of the pictures, and they looked away before I could even get to the worst ones. My dad scolded me. How could he take such awful pictures? It looks too realistic. Dad, they look realistic because they are. I felt like my poor mother almost had a heart attack. I explained to them that I bought this camera from a thrift store on my way back from the town in Oregon. They immediately had me call the police. The police stopped by to analyze the pictures. They were just as shocked as my parents were and tried to blame me. I explained the situation, and they took the camera from me and did some investigating. It's been about 2 years now, and I haven't heard anything new from the detectives assigned to the case. The case is still cold. All I could assume is that the disturbed individual that caused these families such a violent demise was sick and twisted and got satisfaction out of hurting people. This person would stalk the families and familiarize themselves with their surroundings, hence the pictures of the campsites. I've been going to therapy now for about 8 months and it's really helping, but I could still see the image of a decapitated child in my head.